Hello, my friend. Doc Martin here. In the last video, I talked about reframing misbehavior as stress behavior instead. Today, I'm going to delve more into stress and people with developmental disorders. So, why look at stress? Well, adults in the United States report high levels of stress. 75% of adults reported experiencing moderate to high levels of stress in the past month, and nearly half reported that their stress has increased in the past year. Now, people with autism and other developmental disorders experience as much, if not more, stress than the general population. Now, in one study, boys with oppositional defiant disorder showed memory impairments and the inability to sustain attention under stressful conditions. The failures of boys with ODD to flexibly adapt their behavior may underlie some of their aggressive and antisocial behavior in complex and emotionally charged situations. Given the host of difficulties attention deficit hyperactivity disorder sufferers must cope with, academic struggles, interpersonal rejection, mood, anxiety issues, it's logical to posit that most affected individuals live with elevated stress levels. And elevated stress levels lead to increases in intense emotions and challenging behaviors. People with intellectual disabilities also experience high levels of stress. While many of the stressors are similar to those in the general population, like money, work, crime, violence, people with intellectual disabilities also experience different worries than their non-disabled peers. Things like being bullied, losing someone they were dependent upon, failing in life, and making and keeping friends. Factors associated with stress for adults with intellectual disabilities, such as social exclusion, limited support networks, discrimination, bullying, loneliness, and poverty, negatively influence their mental health, putting them at risk for mental health difficulties such as depression, anxiety, and severe behavior problems. Well, people with autism are reported to have the highest stress levels of any disability group. The following characteristics of Autism Spectrum Disorder make them especially vulnerable to stress and limit their ability to cope. Difficulties with verbal and nonverbal communication, problems with socialization, auditory, visual, and tactile impairments, executive functioning deficits that impair ability to comprehend stressors accurately and respond effectively, and behaviors like repetitive motor behaviors, ritualistic patterns, and insistence on sameness that result in rigid routines. Individuals with autism experience more stress in their lives than their peers, and because of the poor coping skills they have, they feel the consequences of these stressors in a more debilitating fashion. Studies have shown that individuals with autism, even in a resting state, have much higher levels of stress chemicals, for example, cortisol and adrenaline, than neurotypical individuals. This general state of anxiety and apprehension leaves their nervous system on high alert and in a defensive state. So, what exactly is stress? Well, at first, if you like this video topic, please hit the like and subscribe button. I'd really appreciate that. Thanks. Now, if I asked 10 people what stress was for them, I might just come up with 10 different answers. Some people would describe the things that stressed them out: bills, family issues, time pressures, relationships, and so on. Others would focus on the physical manifestations of stress: weakness, fatigue, poor sleep, headaches, racing heart, stomach problems. Others might emphasize the psychological aspects of stress. Things like racing thoughts, forgetfulness, depression, high feelings of anxiety and worry, hopelessness, overreaction, crying spells. Stress is all of those things and not one of those things entirely. The things that stress you out are certainly a large part of your experience of stress, but they are not stress in and of itself. So, back to my original question. What exactly is stress? Stress is a complex topic. Let's start by making the distinction between stressors, appraisals, the stress response, and the coping response. Stressors are what activate the stress response. They can be anything you see, taste, hear, touch, imagine, anything that could do you harm. Stressors can be either external, work, family, finances, or internal. Things like feeling left out, not feeling good about yourself, worries about the future. But something is not a stressor unless we think it is a stressor. That is, we appraise it as stressful. Now, say I'm walking down the path in the woods, and I look over and I see a stick lying by the side of the path. And I think, it's just a stick, no stress. But if I think, oh, there's a snake, my heart pounds, I jump back, then that object on the path is a stressor. There is a wide variation on how people respond to stress. You must not only notice the stressor, but you must appraise it to be threatening or an aversive experience in order for the stress reaction to follow. Let me give you an example of how the appraisal process might work for some parents or other support staff. Let's say the person you support is exhibiting challenging behavior. Your appraisal of the cause of the person's difficult behavior can either be stressful or not. If you view tantruming, whining, and defiance as rising from the individual's willful intentions, you're more likely to hold that person responsible for those unpleasant behaviors, and you're more likely to have a pronounced stress reaction. If you view the difficult behavior as the way the person is handling their stress, your action might be one of empathy rather than anger. Your appraisal, again, can either lead to stress response or not. Now, the stress response is a neurological and physiological shift that happens when you encounter one of those threats. Hans Sell, the first person to use the term stress, said that stress occurs when something is perceived as a threat in any way, and you have a negative emotional reaction followed by your body and mind responding with a cascade of negative physical reactions. In the early 1990s, Arnold Lazarus, an expert in stress, said that stress is a negative, usually but not restricted to, psychological and physiological response to demands that are perceived to be greater than the resources available to meet them. And the definition I like best was made by one of the foremost authorities on stress, Bruce McEwen. He died just last year at 81 years of age. He said, stress may be defined as a threat, real or implied, to the psychological or physiological integrity of the individual. The stress response is an adaptive response that helps us cope with things like avoiding being bitten by a rattlesnake on the side of the path. When we appraise something as stressful, our body releases a cascade of stress chemicals that initiate the fight or flight response. Your heart pounds, your muscles tighten, breathing quickens, beads of sweat appear. A lot more complex things happen, but the point is your entire body and mind change in response to the perceived threat. And finally, you have coping responses, ways to reduce the stress you feel. Some coping responses can be healthy, and some can be very unhealthy. And I will get more into this topic on a subsequent video. So, when we talk about stress, we're really talking about a process, not a single event. And this process includes 4 components: an external causal agent or event, the stressor; the cognitive appraisal of this event to determine is it harmful or not, the appraisal; the consequential effects on the mind and body, the stress response; and coping mechanisms to reduce the harmfulness of this event or agent, the coping response. I'll give you another example. I'm walking on the road and a car backfires, the stressor. I think it's a gunshot, the appraisal. My body goes into fight or flight mode, the stress reaction. I dive into the nearby bushes, the coping response. Now, let me ask you some questions about what stress means to you. If you want, write your answers down on a piece of paper. What immediately comes to mind when you think of the word stress? What causes stress for you? External or internal? Combination of both. What does it feel like emotionally and physically? And finally, what are some of the ways you cope with the stressors in your life? Are they positive or negative coping responses? Now, don't forget, if you're interested in everything I'm talking about, to hit both the like and subscribe buttons and turn on that little bell next to subscribe so that you don't miss out on any of my uploads, because I know you're really going to like them a lot. This channel is being designed especially for you. Take a look at my online Moving Behind Meltdowns Academy that has 2 programs for you, a mindfulness program and a healthy eating program. Also, look at my Healthy Lifestyle Learning Academy, designed for people with developmental disabilities, with programs to be done with the help of a support provider. Both links are below. Thanks for watching, and please leave any comments you might have or any suggestions for topics you'd like to see covered. I'd really appreciate that. So see you next time, and just keep on trucking.